What is going on YouTube? Gabs here and welcome to the 24th episode of the Tech Pills weekly live stream. So let's jump right to the first news of today. It's been rumored for a while. There have been speculations about it online for quite some time at this point. And now it's finally here. A Raspberry Pi 4 with 8 gigabytes of RAM. It's out there, you can buy it, and it's glorious. So let's talk about it. So when the Raspberry Pi 4 initially released, in the little booklets that you got, like with the units, there were mentions of an 8 gigabyte variant of the Raspberry Pi 4. And as far as I remember, the Raspberry Pi Foundation dismissed that as just a printing error. So no one really thought much about it for a while, but then at some point, people never really bought that. I mean, that it wasn't coming. And in fact, here we are. They made it. They released it. An 8 gigabyte Raspberry Pi module, and apparently the reason that they didn't release this before was because of low availability for 8 gigabytes DIMM modules. So I guess that now everything's sorted and it's out there. You can buy it. The MSRP is $75, and it makes it very compelling for what the Raspberry Pi 4 is capable of. And of course, if you want to use the Raspberry Pi 4 as a full-on desktop PC replacement, having more than 4 gigabytes of RAM is a must these days. And 8 gigabytes, while still not all that much, is definitely very usable, and I have used and still I'm using computers with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and that's just fine, particularly since we're all running Linux. It's even easier to push more work with just 8 gigabytes of RAM. And anyway, it's definitely comparable with actual PCs that are on the market. So again, very compelling. A full-on computer for $75 is just, it's just great. The use case that I would personally have for it is a home theater PC, and I think that having that 8 gigabytes of RAM would allow me to do more with it than just watch movies and stream content. Of course, this would mean more multitasking, so I could have many different browser tabs open at the same time. Maybe I'm reading some articles while having the news streaming on the other side of the screen. It's a very useful feature to have all this headroom. And while everything what I'm talking about was theoretically doable on 4 gigabytes of RAM, having 8 gives me that peace of mind of not having to swap into the hard drive. Also considering that in the case of the Raspberry Pi, the hard drive is a very low SD card, so having this much headroom is definitely a very big plus for me. And what would make this new 8 gigabyte Raspberry Pi 4 shine? Probably a NextDoc Touch. And that was a segue to our next news of today. The NextDoc Touch is the very latest version of the popular computerless laptop. It's nothing new really. I mean, the NextDoc has been around for a while, but it just got a new version that's called NextDoc Touch, and it now features, as the name implies, a touchscreen, very unoriginally. So if you're not familiar with this kind of product, the NextDoc is a laptop-like device, but without any actual computer inside. So I'm talking about no CPU, no GPU BIOS or anything. It's just, if you can see it like a dumb laptop. It's to put it in another way, it's like a clamshell monitor with built-in battery bank, speakers, touchpad, keyboard, and a USB hub. And now, again, a touchscreen. So this newest version features a 1080p 14-inch touch-enabled screen, hence the name, with narrower bezels compared to the previous model, the NextDoc 2. And apparently it reportedly also has a larger battery, better speakers, and a better touchpad. Interestingly enough, it has no webcam. I don't know about that. I think that's an interesting choice given this particular day and age. The way this works is very simple. You just plug a compatible device in, and you can just use it as like an extension of your device. So it typically comes with a USB Type-C interface. So if you have like a phone or a single board computer that supports USB Type-C display link, you can just use the one USB Type-C port to both provide power and USB connectivity and display connectivity. So that's very convenient if you're able to use just one cable. But in the case of something like the Raspberry Pi or other single board computers that don't have USB-C display link, you can use an external HDMI adapter to plug in the video component of it. So again, I'm linking this news with the one about the Raspberry Pi 4 8GB version, because I think this would be a hard to beat combo. You just get yourself a Raspberry Pi or a similar single board computer, and you just I mean, to me it's just obvious. You can just plug it into the NextDoc, and you have battery, you have all the peripherals you need, and you can just use it even on the go if you want to. Of course, you can plug in whatever you want. It's not just limited to phones, tablets, or single board computers. You could even theoretically connect it to a full-fat PC or laptop or any other kind of compatible device via HDMI, even a console if you want to. I mean, this would be a pretty interesting way to have a semi-portable console. And of course, this would defeat kind of the purpose of this device, but of course it's totally doable because it's a dumb device that interfaces with standard interfaces. So I think that's pretty awesome. And with a price tag of 320 USD MSRP, it doesn't sound like a bad deal at all, particularly if you factor in how much you would pay just for the monitor alone, plus, you know, all the other peripherals that you would need to use a computer. So again, very interesting option, particularly for single board computer users. If I ever want to use a Raspberry Pi 4 or any other kind of single board computer as a full-on laptop or desktop replacement, I think that this is, at least for me, a must-have accessory. I just thought that this was an interesting product that, I mean, I think that it needed some coverage. Moving on to the next news of today, Core Control lets you overclock your AMD GPU easily, and now it supports Navi. So, Core Control is a graphical application for tuning the performance of your system. It's particularly focused on overclocking AMD GPUs, and in fact, it's been often compared to AMD's Wattman software that basically allows you to do the same thing. So this Linux app, that of course is open source, and it doesn't have it's not like sponsored or developed by AMD. It's a community project. I just wanted to stress that out. Lets you easily fine-tune and control your AMD GPU by setting frequencies for its various power states for both the core clock and the memory clock. It lets you tune the voltages and adjust the fan curves to give you your preferred mix of power and acoustics. So a very interesting and useful program. Also, if you don't want to overclock your GPU, you can also downclock it and downvolt it or undervolt it to have like better power consumption and lower noise levels. And I've been using the development version of Core Control with my 5700 XT for a while now, and it has undoubtedly proven to be a very nice piece of software. Particularly, I think that the included customizable bar graph is very useful and has been very useful in a variety of these different scenarios to understand where my thermal limit was with my GPU, to understand where my clock got stuck, and all the kind of stuff that you would need to do with GPU overclocking. If you have an AMD GPU and want to dabble into the wonderful world of overclocking, just give this a try. I really suggest you do. And the only warning that I want to give you about using these kind of software, not this one in particular, but in general overclocking software, be aware that when you overclock a piece of hardware, of course, you're going kind of beyond the manufacturer specification. So, of course, you have to keep an eye on temperatures in your system and other parameters. And overclocking could result in instabilities in your system, and I have experienced this myself firsthand. In particular, I had some graphical artifacting when overclocking my GPU memory beyond a certain point, and that's totally expected. You just need to know what you're doing, and you won't mess up anything. Just be aware that if you're not careful, it could damage your hardware, but it's very unlikely, but just be aware of it. Again, Core Control lets you overclock your AMD GPU easily. I really suggest you check it out. So let's move on to the next news of today. NextCloud Hub 19 just got released with a heap of new features. And the most interesting feature that I want to cover here now is the integration with Collabora Code. Collabora Code is it's the developer edition or community edition, if you prefer that, of the Collabora Office Suite, which is an online browser-based Office suite that's actually based on LibreOffice. So it's just to put it in an easier way, it's substantially LibreOffice but in your browser. And having the integration with Collabora Code means so much for NextCloud, at least in my opinion. In the previous release, NextCloud actually added support for the OnlyOffice online Office suite. And I've personally tried that, and while I think that it's very interesting, I also realized that it's not actually all that stable and it doesn't work as expected, particularly if you have like many users connecting to the same document. It often gets out of sync and it doesn't even warn you about it. So OnlyOffice hasn't been great for me, and I have reasons to believe that Collabora Code will be a lot better. So having this feature integrated into NextCloud is just great. And just to be clear, there were some integrations with Collabora Code before, but they required you to actually install Collabora Code separately, either on your server or on another server or in a Docker image. And I've tried to mess around with that many times. I've never succeeded doing that. So having these built into NextCloud in the next release, again, NextCloud Hub 19, is just great. It's something that I'm very curious to check out. Once the NextCloud Snap gets updated, yes, because if you don't know already, I use the NextCloud Snap on my home server to get NextCloud because that's just very convenient. As soon as that gets updated, I'm just gonna update it and try it out, and maybe I'll report back if there's anything noteworthy. One other feature that got just included in NextCloud Hub 19 is that the DEC virtual Kanban app has now been integrated into NextCloud, and that's particularly useful. That's particularly useful if you're, in this particular day and age with the whole human malware situation that's still going on, being able to have some organization tools to be able to effectively work remotely is very important for many organizations, and a Kanban being one of the tools that particularly developers, but not just developers, use when organizing their work. Having an integrated Kanban into NextCloud is something that I was really looking forward to. DEC has been around for a while in beta form, so probably the fact that they're now including it into the actual full-fat release of Nextcloud. I think it means that it's now stable and ready for production, which is just great. This is another thing that I'm really curious to check out. I haven't really used Kanbans much at all. Maybe because I'm used to working in a different way, but definitely I will check this out. All right, moving on to the next news of today. Lenovo is back in the Linux news for this week because they just announced that they will offer all ThinkStation desktop PCs and ThinkPad P-series laptops with Ubuntu pre-installed. So that was kind of unexpected, to be honest, at least for me. So after the recent news of Lenovo working on offering their laptops with Fedora pre-installed, they just doubled up. Lenovo just announced that all of its ThinkStation desktop PCs, again, and all of the ThinkPad P-series laptops will be available with Ubuntu as well. And it won't be just a half-assed option to have like the vanilla OS installed and have the user deal with the various hardware support and various issues like other OEMs have done in the past. No, this time this will be done properly. Lenovo said that they will, quote, upstream device drivers directly to the Linux kernel to help maintain stability and compatibility throughout life of the workstation. So I just want to say, finally a mainstream OEM that gets it. It's not enough to just ship your device with Linux. Of course, you have to commit to it. And this is the way to go. Contributing to the kernel, contributing the actual device drivers for the fingerprint scanners, for the various specialized hardware, particularly that you can find on ThinkPads. They are typically highly specialized professional working machines. Having OEM support in the kernel for these devices is just great. And I'm incredibly happy to see Lenovo moving in this direction. I really hope to see other manufacturers following soon in the same direction. Also because, I mean, it's kind of obvious. The Linux user crowd is a noisy one, and we are passionate about technology. We're passionate about computers, and we want to have nice machines. And if mainstream OEMs won't deliver, we'll just turn to boutique OEMs like System76, Star Labs, Entroware, and Tuxedo Computers, Slimbook. I know so many, and there are probably still many to mention. So it's not like we lack choice, but seeing again mainstream OEMs support Linux the proper way is just, it's just heartwarming. All right, let's move on to the next news of today. Linux Mint and Snaps, a mostly hate relationship. So with Ubuntu 20.04 forcing Snaps further down its users' throats, users are already annoyed enough. But when a downstream distribution has to deal with it, I think it's even worse. And I'm talking about Linux Mint in particular in this case. With 2004, Canonical decided it was a good idea to wire up the apt package manager so that when asking it to install certain packages, a notable example being Chrome, it instead installs them as a snap. And the user, of course, doesn't know anything about this until, well, I'll get to that. So the Linux Mint founder, Clément Lefebvre, I hope I pronounced that right, said that with the upcoming version of Linux Mint 20, they will firmly push against snaps. And part of their strategy apparently is instructing users on how to install those packages that Ubuntu forcibly replaced with snaps. And additionally, they will set up apt or apt so that it will not install or use snapd unless specified by the user. Of course, at the end of the day, the user has the final say in all of these matters, so providing the manual option to use snap is still great on Linux Mint side. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to stress again how I don't like the direction that Canonical is taking with Ubuntu. I mean, I don't think that Snapd has proven itself to be suited for desktop use at this point. As I already said previously, I already use Snap for my server, and again, I've said this many times, I will repeat it. I don't think that Snap is half bad for server use. I think it's actually pretty good, but for desktop use, I don't know. I don't think we're there yet. The reason I don't think that we're ready for snaps on the desktop is that I keep hearing problems from my Ubuntu using friends with apps that they install not working properly, just to find out that indeed they're actually snaps and not native traditional packages. Most of the time they just solve these particular problems by opting for the Flatpak variants of those packages, and I mean, that's kind of ironic because Flatpaks and snaps are supposed to do the same thing, and of course at this point we have some form of proof that one technology works better, at least for the end user, than the others. So I mean, it's not great that users have to fiddle with their computers to be able to use the software that they want the way that they're used to. Of course, I can already hear you screaming at the monitor saying something like, well, if you don't like what Ubuntu is doing, just don't use it. And of course, but that's not the whole problem. Of course, I don't use Ubuntu, and for many reasons, and one of them being, I don't like this whole Snap situation, but that's far from being the sole reason why I don't use Ubuntu. But that's a topic for another day. It's not like the fact that we don't use Ubuntu. Maybe we're power users. I am a power user. You listening probably are as well. But the fact that we don't use Ubuntu doesn't mean we shouldn't care. In fact, if you didn't know already, like it or not, but Ubuntu is the face of the Linux desktop. It's what most people think about when they hear Linux. And it's what most curious users will try for the first time when they decide that they want to try switching to Linux. They will definitely 100, if not 99.9% of the time, they will go to Ubuntu. And what happens is that if new users experience these kind of stupid issues like apps don't working or not being able to read external storage, and this is actually something that I've seen firsthand, they will just think that it's a Linux problem, and they will just think that something like this wouldn't happen on Windows or Mac OS. And what will happen is that they will just dismiss Linux as a tinker toy that they don't want to use. They will just get back to whatever they were using before. And that's not what we want to happen in the Linux ecosystem. I really hope that Canonical is able to hear the community voice here, is able to understand that they're doing something wrong and their users are complaining, and start thinking this whole Snap thing through. The first thing that they should focus on, in my opinion, is ease of use, and the second thing is a good overall user experience. And at this point, with the policy they're adopting with snaps, they're just moving backwards. And again, I think that they're overall damaging the whole Linux desktop ecosystem with these violent actions that they're taking with snaps. Because this is like, again, they're forcing Snap down the user's throats. This is not something that they should do, because Snap is, of course, not ready for desktop usage. And I don't know what's about that. Maybe they didn't do enough testing. Maybe the desktop team doesn't have enough resources to fully commit to test snaps for the desktop. But if they did test them through, they would have realized the same thing that users already have. Of course, that Snap isn't ready for desktop usage because there are too many things that are broken. There's too much to fiddle, and at the end of the day, when people end up installing a Snap by accident, because we're talking about accidents here, when people end up installing snaps as accidents, by accident, they want to uninstall them and get a proper native or traditional package or another form of package like a Snap, a Flatpak, instead of the Snap. That's not something that an Ubuntu user should do. Ubuntu is focused on new users and normal computer users that don't care and don't want to care about technology or Linux or how you manage an operating system or packages. They just want to have the app store and they want the apps they download to just work. And when something like GIMP, which is a fundamental piece of what makes the Linux desktop what it is, doesn't work properly, that's bad. That's just plain bad. And I fully agree with the Linux Mint people. They're trying to push snaps away from their distribution because they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with the problems. They know that it doesn't work as well as it should on desktop, and that's the direction that they're taking with their distribution. So I don't know, probably at some point I will start recommending Mint again over Ubuntu if this thing doesn't change. Of course, I don't want to hate on Ubuntu. I wouldn't make this argument if I didn't care about Ubuntu or Canonical or the whole Linux ecosystem. I'm not an Ubuntu user. I'm an Ubuntu server user, but I'm not an Ubuntu desktop user. And in theory, I shouldn't care, but I care about the whole ecosystem. I care about the distribution. I care about the experience that new users have with their systems. And this ain't working. Alright guys, and I think that's gonna wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for watching, I really do appreciate it. If you like this video, please make sure to press the thumbs up button down there, and also remember to subscribe to my channel if you want more of this. Also remember to join the TechPills community at techpills.technology/community. You can also find all the various links to the Telegram channel, the Telegram group, and the Discord server on the left side of the screen with these very handy QR codes. Again guys, thank you again very much for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.